shesh-ah-mun was inexplicably drawn to a small, dark stall. Out of the shadows appeared a stooped, elderly woman. She opened her mouth to speak, but shesh-ah-mun could not hear her. She beckoned the young girl to come closer. Being only inches from the woman's face, shesh-ah-mun could smell death and something else she could not quite put her finger on. Though repulsed, she refused to move away, knowing deep down inside her this old woman had something important to say. shesh-ah-mun, daughter of Hury and Nefra, you are venturing into great danger. That is just a portion of the book, Beyond Palace Walls, written by Erin Chase, and she will be on Agree or Disagree the podcast, starting right now. A talented storyteller, Erin Chase effortlessly transports the reader to another time and place, rich with history and enhanced by adventure, mystery, and romance. Join shesh-ah-mun as she comes of age along this fascinating and often unexpected journey. That is one of the many good reviews on Goodreads of the book Beyond Palace Walls. shesh-ah-mun is an adopted 14-year-old living in a village along the Nile River in ancient Egypt. When Pharaoh's royal wife, Mira, takes note of her familiar features and unique beauty, she suggests shesh-ah-mun becomes a concubine in the royal harem. Before she departs for Thebes, the young girl receives a chilling warning from a mysterious stall keeper in the local market. You are venturing into great danger. Be aware of those with the same blood, as all is not what appears to be. And we welcome Erin Chase right now. Hello there.
Hello.
How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on this. I don't know what the weather's like in Lethbridge.
It's cold and windy.
Cold and windy Lethbridge. It's coldish and not windy in Richmond. And we are hanging through Google Hangout. And we've got lots to talk about. So, Erin, tell us the premise behind the book.
It's an historical fiction set in 17th dynasty ancient Egypt. And as you read, shesh-ah-mun is an adopted girl living in a village along the Nile River. One day she gets recruited into Pharaoh's harem, and she quickly finds out that life isn't quite as she had hoped it would be. She becomes Pharaoh Ramses' property, is forbidden from pursuing any other man, and is imprisoned within the palace walls. She must choose between family and royalty, pride and duty, honor, and her own life.
So, how did you come up with the idea of this book? I'm always fascinated by the concept behind creating something. How did you do it?
You know, I've always been fascinated by ancient Egypt. It's a very unique culture and unique time period. I think their polytheistic religion and culture is very fascinating because it's so different from ours. So that setting was very easy for me to choose. And, you know, my ideas come to me usually when I'm relaxed and not thinking about anything and not trying. And I remember laying on the couch one day watching this really cheesy made-for-TV movie. I think it was called The Door at the End of the Hall. And all of a sudden, the idea just hit me. It had nothing to do with this horror movie, but it just hit me. I had to get it out on paper. And it's something, the main character is adopted, which I am as well. So that...
Oh, I am too, actually.
Oh, see, there's a lot of people that you just don't know about until you get talking about it.
Yeah. It's one of those things we don't talk a lot about in public, actually.
No, it's almost become a taboo topic. Not taboo, but an uncommon one to talk about. And people who aren't adopted usually have no idea what to ask you, what they can ask you, what they want to ask you. And those of us that are adopted it's our way of life. It's just part of life. We don't need to talk about it.
Yeah. It's true. It's part of our story. It's part of our vernacular, part of how we were brought up. So yeah, it doesn't, yeah, it's, but there's a lot of we're getting off track. We're going down a rabbit hole, but it's an important rabbit hole because it's still within the story. So we get a lot of questions about, is that so? You're not really their mother and they're not really your mother and father. Like there's so many myths around that we can dig into another time. But
Oh yeah.
yeah, but shesh-ah-mun is also adopted.
Yeah, so because that was such an important factor to me, everything just kind of came together. Ancient Egypt, adoption, and some mystery, a little bit of romance, some action. It all just came to me as one.
Hmm.
Just that fateful day watching the cheesy movie.
So before you wrote the book, did you do several trips to Egypt? And what is, you said it was a very different culture. So I'm curious what your, like, I mean, there's some obvious answers to there, but I would love your perspective. What's some of the big differences you noticed going to Egypt and living here in Canada?
So yes, I went to Egypt. I've only taken one trip, and it was right after I started writing this story. So I went in 2010, right before the Arab Spring hit. So I was very, very fortunate to get there before the country was briefly taken over and the museum was sacked and artifacts destroyed. So, I mean, we can talk about current Egypt and we can talk about ancient Egypt because current Egypt, um, very different how everybody, not necessarily everybody lives their lives, but the people that I walked amongst and interacted with, they were the ones in the marketplace, the people that were just kind of trying to make it by. Whereas here, we're obviously it's Canada, we're very, very fortunate with our healthcare, our education system, pretty much everything.
Hmm.
Now, comparing ancient Egypt, I referred to the polytheistic religion, whereas I'm Christian, so it's monotheistic. We have one God. Whereas in ancient Egypt, like just like ancient Greece and ancient Rome, they worshipped a series of gods
Hmm.
for different reasons. And that's always kind of fascinated me how you pray to one person for one thing and you pray to another deity for another thing. And even just their temples are fascinating, their pyramids, their use of the Nile, which is the absolute lifeblood of Egypt. Their transportation was different. Pretty much everything is different. And there were so many things that were invented in Egypt that we still use today. So all of that, it's just, to me, it's where culture, I know there'll be people who disagree with this, but for me, this is where culture really begins, is in ancient Egypt.
Why do you say that?
Just some of the different inventions they had, even say building the Great Pyramids, the Pyramids of Giza. I believe that's the only ancient wonder of the world that's still left standing today. And when you go into some of the temples and different ruins, you can still see the paint that was used to design things. Like it's still clear as day. The perfumes that were found buried with King Tut and some of the other pharaohs, they haven't lost their scent. Those oils are still being produced and used by major companies such as Chanel and all the other big perfume producers today.
Hmm.
I mean, I know perfume isn't culture, but it's part of culture. Even say their kohl eyeliner, makeup. They had headrests in their bed, water chambers, or toilets. It's just quite fascinating. The color blue, from what I've heard, was invented in Egypt.
Really? I did not know that.
So, and blue is a very predominant color there. It's the royal color is blue and white.
Hmm.
So I'm sure I need to do some more fact checking just in case, but you know, it's it's just a very unique place, and the fact that you can still go there today and be completely immersed in their ruins and temples and go inside and see the sarcophagi, it's just amazing.
Hmm. Hmm. Uh, yeah, that is fascinating. So, and I think it's an interesting premise to use Egypt too, because it's I think we have a lot of, and maybe you'll comment about this too. There's some myths maybe around Egypt, or some misconceptions around Egypt too, like that I think we get. So I think digging into that is quite fascinating as well, because and also I would guess that kind of some of our political times, and this was published last year, and we'll talk about how long you've worked on this in a bit. Um, but there's a lot of political, or not necessarily political, but a lot of themes that are kind of current to what we're talking about on media and internets right now, I would imagine. Do you see that,
Hmm.
or?
I can see a little bit of overlap. Um, I mean, it is a completely different time and place in a different world now.
Hmm, yeah. How did you? How, okay, so tell us about the development of shesh-ah-mun, and then some of the other development of all of your characters. Or so
Um,
you can focus on some of the major ones, and maybe some of your favorites that you got.
I think as I wrote, Sheshman just kind of grew with me, and I took out, I looked at a lot of things I did as a kid or as a teenager. I mean, she's not a kid, I guess she's 14 when the story begins. So I looked at, certain things I did and certain ways I acted. There's a scene where she's acting like a brat, before she gets to the palace, and even when she gets there. And I can think of, um, I don't know, just certain things I used to do to annoy my parents, or, get under their skin. Like at the beginning of the novel, it starts with Sheshman talking to her mother, and her mother calls her little one. And that's what my dad always calls me, is little one. So I've tried to take, special anecdotes that mean something to me and intersperse them throughout the story, and help Sheshman develop as a character and grow as a person. So there's certain scenes where she's really angry. Well, I was having a bad day that day, and I can see it come out in my writing, which is a
Hmm.
good thing. But I can recount those emotions that I was feeling several years ago when I was maybe working on that section, being sad or angry. So I tried to use my own feelings and my own like real emotions and real experiences to help develop her as a character, to make sure she was genuine and organic, like grew organically and developed throughout.
Hmm. Hmm. If you Are you satisfied with how she came out, or is there a part of you who's like, there's a part of that I could have added here, or could have added here, or?
Between the different revisions I did, I made sure she came out the way I wanted her
Hmm.
to.
Hmm.
Especially because this is my debut novel, I wanted to make sure the protagonist turned out. I'm not going to say perfect, of course, because she's far from it, but I wanted her to be a relatable character, somebody that everybody of pretty much every age or gender could relate to and say, "Yeah, I know somebody like that," or "Yep, I've done that myself," even though it is set several hundred years ago.
Right. Well, people are still people.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about some of the other characters, like
Um, Sorry,
Myra, Mira, or did I say Myra or Mira?
Mira. Yep,
Okay.
that's correct.
Okay.
So Queen Mira is Pharaoh Ramses' royal wife. So in ancient Egypt, they had several wives and concubines. So Mira is the number one wife, and she becomes an ally of Sheshamun's. She's actually one of my favorite characters. But you can tell she's a very strong and determined woman who Sheshamun looks up to and tries to follow in her footsteps. Not because she's the queen, but because she'll stand up to her husband. She'll stand up for the less fortunate, and she carries herself with grace and ease. And she's well educated, which was not common, for a lot of people back in those days, but particularly women. And thank goodness that's starting to change, or not starting to change, has changed.
Mm-hmm. Still some work to be done. That's a whole
Yes.
other. That's a whole other that's a rabbit hole we can go another time.
Oh yeah.
Um, Mira, and who was the toughest character to write for?
um. Oh, there's quite a few characters in the book. Um, and I primarily, I've got main characters and then the secondary characters. I would say the hardest, I don't know, either Pharaoh Ramses or his son Prince Ramose. Um, Probably Pharaoh Ramses. I can't say too much because it could give away portions of the
Yeah,
story,
no, yeah,
but
of course.
I had to handle him with a lot of care because of how the story develops.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, that's that's interesting. Okay, you
It's
can't.
vague, I know, but
No. I'm like, no. That's totally fine. It's promoting your book. You have to read it to dig into more, people. That's the bottom line. Pick up the book. That's what we're trying to do here. Um, so, how long did it take for you to write this book?
from the
From
time I put down the very first paragraph to the time it was launched electronically and in paper format was almost 6 years. It was a long time. But I also took about a year off from writing. And I searched for an agent for a year as well. So the actual writing portion of it was a lot less.
hmm,
But to talk about from start to finish, it was 6 years.
wow, and several rewrites, I imagine, several
Yeah,
ups and downs.
yeah, not like entire rewrites, but a lot of editing, a lot of sections I would do over again. When I really get into it, it doesn't take me long to write at all. But it's hard to balance, writing a novel with other jobs and regular life.
Right, right. Yeah, and it's that balance of finding the time to sit and write well and do it really well. How did you do that? How did you find that time? Because there's a
Um,
lot of people that are sitting at home having this dream. It's like, I really want to write a book, but I don't have time to do it because I have this, I have that, and I have the other thing, and then I have soccer, and then that TV show Survivor's on, and then there's This Is Us on Tuesday, and The Good Doctor is a really good show, and then
it
there's
is.
NFL. It is a good show, and then we've got like football on the weekend, so I don't know where I find time to write.
I like how you put that football in there, knowing full well I will be spending 6 hours of my time tomorrow
Yeah.
watching the CFL semifinals. But
Hashtag go Stamps. Oh, sorry. Did that's not fair. No, it's fair. Go Stamps. We can say
go
that.
Stamps. Oh yeah, go Stamps.
Yeah.
Um, there's a couple different ways to do it. A lot of people, or some people, will schedule time to write, which works for them. It doesn't for me. If I know what I want to say, then a schedule is fine. Like, okay, I'll come home from work and I'll sit down, I'll write for half an hour, 2 hours until I'm done, until I run out of ideas or I'm mentally exhausted. But then there's other people who will say, yeah, I'm going to do this every day for this set time. But I find that really hinders creativity. If the ideas aren't coming to me, I can't force them to either.
Hmm.
So, for anybody who's listening to this who wants to write, I would say carry around a notebook with you. That's what I do and still do. Carry around a notebook. Every time you get an idea, jot it down on the page. If that idea carries into the story, or you've started your story and you're just looking to carry on writing it, just write. If you're on a bus or a train somewhere, or if you've got an extra 20 minutes during your lunch break, pull out your notepad or your laptop and just start writing, because little by little that starts adding up. Or I'll even wake up, I'll be laying in bed, 11 p.m., and all of a sudden it'll hit me, the next step. I'll jump up, grab my phone, open the notes section, and start typing.
Hmm.
So
So
there, you can find the time. It might be in little chunks. It could be 5 or 10 minutes here or there, or it could be an hour or 2 hours, but it it adds up, and that's might be the only way you get those words out. And speaking of The Good Doctor, like we said, great show. I'll write while I'm watching TV, or whether it's football or a TV show or just listening to music. So I might not be completely focused on one or the other, but at least I'm able to do two things at once, including getting the story out.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, because I mean, I know for me, I need the noise around me that I seem to work better as well.
Hmm.
What was, what was I going to ask? Uh, yeah, yeah, finding that time and like so, and not necessarily scheduling it, but allowing that to create. Did you set yourself a deadline for this to be done, or were you?
Actually, yeah, I did. So once the book had so I had quite a bad writer's block for a number of months, but I was going through a period in my life where I had a lot of things going on, and I couldn't be emotionally or mentally committed to writing. So I took about 9 months off there, and then once I got back into writing, I said, okay, I've had enough. I'm halfway done. I want to get this out before I die. So in 3 months, I want the rest of the story to be finished. Well, I not only beat my deadline, but in record timing for me, I was able to write half of my novel, so 50,000 words in a month and a half.
Wow.
So I would come home because the ideas were already there. Like, I didn't have that writer's block anymore. I didn't need to stretch for that creativity. I would come home, I would set my bags down, and I would start writing immediately. And I would write until I needed to just stop to find food. And then I would just keep writing. So every day for a couple hours at a time, I would just sit and write because I wanted to get this out to the world. I didn't want it to be sitting with just me for forever.
Hmm. How do you overcome that? Writer's block is something everybody in the author's world has dealt with at some point in time. How did you how do you overcome that? Or is it something that you overcome, or is it like, you know what, you just let the thoughts hit you when they come and just work it out that way?
Um, I use a couple different methods. If so, I usually I plot out my story, at least the beginning and some spots in the middle. So one way I defeat writer's block is if I know what my end is going to be, I work backwards from there and try to overcome that writer's block that way. Or I'll allow myself to completely relax and zone out. No different than how the story idea hit me when I was watching that movie on TV. I will lay there and watch, some brainless show that allows you to just zone out, or I'll take an hour in a float tank, or I'll go for a massage and just let my mind completely clear itself. And then usually sometime in that half hour or hour, the idea will just come to me and I'll have unintentionally broken through that writer's block.
Hmm. So it's more natural then.
Yeah, for the most part, for me, it's more natural, and it's not something I can necessarily control, which I kind of like.
Hmm. What is the like with the writer's block? I wanted to dig in to this for a little bit. What is some of the myths about the writer's block? We'll get into myths and authors in a second, or being an author in a second. But the myth of the writer's block and overcoming that. What are some things that are set out there that you find? You know what? I don't necessarily see that as necessarily incredibly healthy, or I don't know how that really works. But okay, if it works for you, it works for you.
I'm trying to think what other people do when it comes to writer's block. Um, the one thing, it might work for others, but it doesn't for me, as I've been talking about, is forcing yourself, like sitting staring at a screen until the words come. I think that's very ineffective for me, anyways. The harder you work at it, the less effective it's going to be. If that makes any sense. Just trying to think what else, what other things I've heard other writers they struggle with.
It sounds like a lot of them want to force it out.
Yes.
where it's like, okay, no, I just gotta, if I just pound it out, it's gonna work, right? It it actually would see, I've done some writing. I haven't published anything, but I've written and stuff, and it feels like, it doesn't. If you're forcing it, it's not genuinely you,
Hmm.
and you're going to go back to that drawing board anyway, realizing it's not genuinely you.
Yeah, and then usually you'll scrap that idea and start all over again. So really, you are just back to square one.
Hmm.
But it's worse because now you've wasted time, in my opinion, and you're more frustrated with yourself because you thought, hey, I finally beat this. I've got an idea out there. But no, wait, I hate that idea. I have to start over again.
Hmm. Or it doesn't fit with the story.
Yeah, exactly. And you can tell when somebody was writing just to this for the sake of writing in some stories. I mean, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I do know that happened with me in the sequel that I'm working on now, sequel to Behind Palace Walls. And it felt so contrived because I felt obligated to put pen to paper. And so, I thought, oh, great, I finished a chapter in an afternoon. Okay. And then I came back to it a couple weeks later and I was upset with myself. I read it and went, this is absolutely horrible. Like, why did I even bother? And it took a long time to get over that self anger.
Hmm.
So I've really learned to appreciate, just let it flow naturally. If the words come to you, they come to you. If they don't, they don't. Just like I don't set a schedule for my writing. That may work great for others, but it's not me unless the idea is already there.
Hmm. Hmm. What are man? There's so many ways I want to go here. You've opened some doors, which is great. That's the idea of the podcast: is you converse, and there's things that come out. Uh, what are some of the biggest triumphs that you had, other than obviously publishing this book and getting this out? And we'll talk about the self-publishing part in a second. And what are some of the things that you learned along the way that you struggled with and became good or hard lessons?
With writing or publishing or just anything.
Yeah, with your process of getting here.
Um, I learned about the world of self-publishing, that's for sure.
Well, we'll get
Um,
into
so,
that.
uh, Sorry.
We'll get into that.
Yeah. So the greatest triumph, like you said, would be having it published. Actually, finishing it was the greatest triumph. It wasn't even getting it published. It was just putting that final period on the page. I think, the greatest feeling was when um, my story was still just sitting in a Word document. It wasn't an ebook yet. It wasn't a paperback yet. And I asked one of my friends to read my novel when she was on a vacation. I said, just tell me what you think. And I knew she wasn't a reader. She admitted to it. But by the end of the first day, she had already finished 7 chapters. She said, I can't put this down. Oh, okay, great. That's awesome. And I thought, oh, maybe she's just trying to make me feel good about things. Well, I can't remember if her vacation was maybe 7 or 10 days, but I know halfway through the vacation, she had finished the entire book. And she said, Kate, I'm ready for the sequel. Give me the next one. And I've heard that from a couple of non-readers, which is huge for me, because if I can capture the imagination and attention of somebody who doesn't necessarily enjoy reading or pick it up as a hobby, I think I've done a really good job.
Awesome. That's a good feeling. That's a really good feeling, especially attracting non-reader.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And not just attracting them, but keeping them there, holding them, keeping them focused on the page. And I think so that was probably my greatest triumph. But one of my greatest letdowns was, so I said earlier that I spent a year trying to find an agent or a publisher. And I used a site, I think it was called Query Tracker, which is awesome for anybody who's looking for an agent. You can record their yays or nays on like a grid like format, and you can keep track of which agent represents which genre. So anyways, I received my first rejection letter, or I just didn't hear back from them, and I thought, oh, no big deal, everybody receives at least a few. Well, a few grew into over 100. And in the meantime, I had several show interest in my work and say, oh, can you send me the first 10 pages? Okay, send me the first 3 chapters. But then it didn't go anywhere from there. And at one point, I almost had to deal with a publisher, directly a publisher, not just an agent, but a publisher out of Arizona. And they said, we need you to go back through the book and tweak a few things. It wasn't much, but they gave me a small list to do. But it took me so long to get it done. By the time I returned it back to them, they said, yeah, sorry, we have new ownership now, and we've decided to go in a different direction, and when we've dropped ancient Egypt. So that was, I remember reading that email, sitting at work one morning reading that email, and I broke down crying because I knew, to me, that was the one shot I had, and I blew it because it took too long getting back to them.
That's a terrible story. I'm really sorry. How did you, what's you, don't you have to delve too much into it, but how did you develop a support system to get you through that stuff?
It's funny because as soon as, the girl I was working with, Mel, she saw how upset I was, and she said, let's go for sushi. And that was enough for me. I was feeling better already. We went out for lunch, had some sushi, and she just kind of let me talk about things. So, as people learned what was going on, because I kept the fact that I was writing a book fairly secret. And I think a lot of people, or some people probably do with their debut novel, because it's your baby. You don't want anybody to know what you're doing until it's done. You don't want to have to give them a progress update when it's not going anywhere. So as more people started to learn about the book, that was fine. But then I didn't tell many people that I was trying to get it published, because I thought, what if I'm rejected? I don't want to tell people about these rejections. But after seeing how I was so warmly treated by my friend and my boyfriend and my parents, I started opening up to more people, and they were nothing but encouraging. I had a couple people go through my manuscript, offer help and ideas, and it was actually networking that got me to where I am now, into self-publishing. But yeah, we'll get into that, like you say. But the support system, it was absolutely huge for me. And even though it was horrible at the time being denied by that publisher, I'm glad I was. I wouldn't have it any other way now. I'm so glad I did the self-publishing route.
Okay, let's talk about it. We got here now. Kind of naturally, yes. What was the decision behind self-publishing, and tell us the process.
Well, so going through an agent or a publisher is the traditional route. Some people make it, a lot of people don't. And so, I had 2 options. Actually, I had 3 options. I could either continue trying to find an agent and publisher, I could self-publish it, or I could just toss it out and pretend it never happened. And there was no way I was going to let my book go unread. Even though she's made up, I felt I owed shesh-ah-mun something. Like I owed her. She had to come to life and make her way into other people's lives. So I knew that wasn't an option. So the more I delved into it, I looked at how other people dealt with self-publishing and traditional publishing, and I started to find out some of the horrors of traditional publishing, or not horrors, but setbacks. Okay, great, you've been accepted by an agent, but now that agent needs to find a publisher. So that could take years. Okay, great, now you've been accepted by a publisher, but you're not going to see your book on shelves for another 18 months. Or, yeah, we'll accept your book, but you need to make all of these major changes. And that's one thing I'm very strict about. Unless there's a fatal flaw to the story, of course. I control my book completely. Like, I take full artistic license over it, and I won't let anybody else change that. So I was happy to do the self-publishing route. So a lot of research went into it. Actually, the one thing that made me decide, like I said, I wanted people to read this story, but what made me decide whether it was good enough or not was a friend of mine, another friend that I work with, tipped me off to a lady named Lori, who's now my best friend. We'd never met before, but he said, she works at a local bookstore. They run a local authors program, and that's Chapters Lethbridge. And he said, why don't you give her a call, show her your manuscript, and go from there? So I gave Lori my manuscript, and it was kind of over the Christmas season. This was 2 years ago, and she said, I waited anxiously, and she said, sorry, I'll get to it when I can. She had things going on too, of course. So I waited and waited and waited, and she got back to me, and she said her first reply was, I love it. When's the sequel coming out? And she knows that had she not said that, this book wouldn't be alive today. So she is what pushed me to finally turn this into something, because she's an avid reader. She works at a Chapters. Who better to ask? So I found out more about the local author program, so that not only could I turn it into an ebook and sell it, but I could turn it into a paperback and sell it locally as well. So after that, I started researching and talking to other authors, seeing what they did for self-publishing and all the steps necessary to complete that journey.
Cool. And what's the author scene like in Alberta? How are you seeing it? I know there is an event I went to every once called When Words Collide, which was a really fun event. And I met a couple people there. But tell me from your perspective, what's that scene like? What's the community like? What are the ups and what are the struggles?
As horrible as this is to say, I'm not really engaged in the writer scene with other authors, which is horrible. But we're supposed to support each other and reach out to each other. But I've found doing that online is much easier. So I don't really know too many authors here, but I have seen quite a few of their books sitting on the shelves in Lethbridge. So it is quite prevalent. There's a lot of fantastic comic book artists here, graphic novel designers. We have a lot of poets, a lot of young adult authors, historical fiction. We've got quite a large selection of different genres. There's a lot of diversity here in Alberta.
Is it, I guess you're not in it, but do you find it to be supportive, or what's the online community like in comparison?
The few that I am engaged with here in Lethbridge are very, very supportive. One of them, who I think you know through Twitter as well, Dr. Jay Gamble, who's a prof at U of L, he actually helped me do my book launch, and he's published at least one book of poetry.
Oh.
So he is super, super supportive. And then the online community, everybody supports everyone. I'm sure it happens, but I can't recall even one tweet on Twitter where it was author versus author or negativity. There's constructive criticism. There's a lot of positive encouragement and motivation. It's just become an absolutely incredible support system online, and not just with other authors, but other people, period. We want to see each other succeed. I do believe that people are inherently good and want others to find happiness. And if we can help motivate them in some way, that's fabulous.
That's what Deirdre said. She said everyone really wants other people to succeed. She said that on our last podcast. Wow.
Oh yeah.
Synergetic. Wow. It's true. Yeah, I think for the most part, I think we're more collaborative than competitive for the most part. I think, yeah. Because if I succeed, then you succeed, and we all succeed together, and we take that elevator to wherever the top is, right? Is kind of
exactly.
the end. Yeah. Now where was I going to go? Let me look here. Who are some of your influences?
I would say Wilbur Smith and Pauline Gedge are huge influences for me. They both write or have written historical fiction focusing on ancient Egypt. The first book I read that was written about ancient Egypt was Wilbur Smith and then Pauline Gedge. And she's actually lives in Alberta now,
Oh,
which
wow.
is kind of cool. So I've, fangirled her and written a fan letter, and she wrote me back about a year or two ago, which was kind of cool. But the amount of research that she put into her books was absolutely incredible. So I got a lot of my details, or I learned a lot of things about Egypt just from her novels. So she was definitely a huge motivator for me. And another influence would definitely be Dan Brown, because he keeps you guessing. And that's what I wanted to do with my story. I didn't want the ending to seem so obvious, or, it's clear we're going to go from point A to point B. But instead, we go from point A to point Z, or Z, because we're in Canada. So we go from A to Z with all these twists and turns in between.
And getting to that yeah. What about when you were creating this book, and there's probably a lot of, I even have that fear too. Hey, do you want to hear my podcast to see what you think? And then I'm like, oh no, don't do it. No. But getting feedback, and how do you find constructive, healthy feedback that doesn't leave you beaten down, but keeps you motivated to keep going?
That was one thing I was worried about. I've watched my baby grow up, and now I'm releasing it to the world, and oh God, what if people don't like it? What if they're mean to me? But, the constructive criticism I've received has been just that, constructive, not negative, constructive. I loved your book, but this is what I would suggest. And I took that for what it was. Thought, that is great to know. I'm going to make sure I use that idea or work on that for the sequel. So I really appreciate constructive criticism.
It helps you go forward.
Yeah, it helps me develop.
Yeah. Now, you talk a little bit about your authoring on social media, but you talk more about a couple of other friends. We'll get into that in a second. A couple of other friends.
They're knocking at the door right now.
Actually. Are they? Oh, are they? They could be guests if they,
They might. We'll see.
I think we kind of talked about this, but the author's social, how promoting your book and promoting on social media, how easy is it in this noise of Trump, hashtag #abledge, and right now we're arguing over, what are we arguing over? Lots of different things. They said this, that said that, whatever, the political world, all of the other things. How do you cut through in terms of authors to get your story out there?
As silly as it sounds, there's a lot of hashtags that are beneficial if you're an author on Twitter and you're trying to promote your book. So for mine, I use histfic, which is short for historical fiction. And then I like to do it just for the sake of doing it too, but I love searching through Twitter for different things about ancient Egypt, whether it's news on excavations or just photographs. And anything I find interesting, I'll retweet, and hopefully somebody will see that and say, hey, that's about ancient Egypt. I like that. Let's go to her profile. Oh, look, she wrote a book on it. So it's, that's one way to promote it. But I find the best way has actually been engaging with people. And it's genuine engagement. I'm not the type to just send a tweet and say, hi, how are you? Where are you from? I want to actually know the people that I'm talking to. And I've developed a lot of great friendships through Twitter, and whether they live in Lethbridge and I've met them in person, or they live in Calgary and the same thing, or maybe they're, halfway across the world. So that's been my biggest plus is, to cut through all the political stuff, is just to be me and engage in people or engage with people rather, show an interest in them and show care and concern.
Hmm. Uh, yeah. Let's talk about your two people that you talk about most, and your Twitter is your dogs, Aspen and Rusty. Tell us a little bit about them. What are they up to right now?
They're monsters. That's what they are.
Monsters.
They are currently snuffling at the bedroom door. I'm looking to see if I can see a nose or a paw. But I came home today just before the podcast to find once again that King Rusty had knocked over the garbage can and there was crap everywhere.
Oh.
But
The Adventures of Rusty.
Sorry?
The Adventures of Rusty.
Yeah, exactly. Adventures of Aspen and Rusty. So, no, they're my little support system. Although Aspen does hinder the writing process because the second I pull out my laptop, she flops her head down on it like a cat.
Oh.
Yeah, that's fun, trying to work around her head. But yeah, I know everybody loves the pooches. Rusty has his own hashtag, Random Rusty.
Does Aspen?
I started with annoying Aspen, but I didn't really like that as much, so I just kind of dropped it. She doesn't get one. She's just part of the Random Rusty entourage.
Will you ever write a book about Aspen and Rusty?
I'd like to do a kid's story, but I can't do illustrations to save my life. Even my stickmen aren't straight, so there probably isn't one in the works.
Okay, fair enough. Do you have them on Instagram?
I don't. You know what? Twitter is the only social media I have right now.
Ah, fair enough. It's a fun one.
Yeah, it is.
Now, before we ask about the sequel, you also organize tweet ups in Lethbridge, I think. Do you not? Are you part of that organizing the YQL tweet up? Did I use the correct hashtag?
Yeah, there's a couple of girls and I that do that. We organized our first one in September and we're looking at doing another one for January.
Cool. You know, if I ever get a private jet, if that ever comes, I will fly over in my private jet to Lethbridge.
Perfect.
There you go. Now, let's talk about the sequel. Did the idea of the sequel come up as you were doing Beyond Palace Walls, or when you were done, you were like, you know what, the story isn't quite finished, and you know what, there's things I could do in a second book. How did the sequel idea come?
I had already thought of the sequel while I was writing the first one. And what I should have done was, as soon as the first one was done, just, open up a new Word doc and start on the second one. But I thought, what if I find an agent or publisher who wants me to make some changes that could affect the sequel? Then I would have to redo it. And like I said, I don't even care about that anymore. I have full artistic control. So really, I should have just gone into the second one. But all the ideas are the same. It came to me as I was doing the first.
How tough is it to do a sequel? Because you get this in movies too. It's like the second one is never as good as the first one. Yeah. So how tough is it to write the sequel?
Well, what I found so far is I want the sequel to be able to stand on its own. Like, say if somebody didn't read the first one and picked up the second one first, I want them to be able to read the story and understand it without going, where did this come from? So the part I struggled with was, kind of summarizing or touching on things from the first and making that come out organically without it sounding contrived. And the reason I focused on that is like making the second stand on its own is that's exactly what happened to me when I picked up my first Ancient Egypt book by Wilbur Smith. Is I jumped right into the middle of a series and didn't realize that's what I was doing. So, but I loved the book. I was hooked instantly. So once I found out that was number 2, I went back and read number 1, then jumped to 3 and 4.
Do you see this being a sequel to a sequel, or is this going to become a series? Do you see a spin-off?
I could see this being a trilogy. That's my ultimate goal, is a trilogy. But I don't know. I guess it will depend. By the time I get to, say, the end of the second book or into the third, I'll know if there's any characters I want to continue on with. But by the time that happens, I might be focusing on something else instead.
What else are you working on? Are you working on anything else, or is this your baby that is your baby?
No, so The King's Court is the sequel to this, so that's my primary focus. But I do have another one in the works. It's set in modern day North America, and I've done quite a bit on that one. But it was a nice break from Egypt. So I do like bouncing back and forth between modern day and the past. And that one doesn't quite have a name yet. I think I'll go with I Was Always There. But yeah, so and I always get new ideas for books all the time. So I'll jot them down, and whether they go anywhere or not, it's kind of up in the air.
Fair enough. Is there anything else we want to talk about before we... Did I miss anything?
I don't know. We talked about the dogs, Stampeders.
Yeah. They should win pretty handily, hopefully. Are you concerned?
About the game?
Yeah.
I don't know. I was going to say they've shit the bed for the past few weeks, but that would make my mom gasp when she listens to this. So, but, no, you know what? I'm not concerned. They're going to be at Edmonton tomorrow, and that will be that.
Okay. Are we playing Saskatchewan or Toronto?
I don't know. Last week, a couple weeks ago, I would have told you Toronto, but now I want to say it's going to be Calgary and Saskatchewan in the Grey Cup.
That would be pretty epic.
It would be.
It would be a lot of fun to have
I'd like to see another 13th man problem happen on the Saskatchewan side.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That was... Sorry, Rough Rider fans, but that was one of my favorite moments of CFL lore when, you added the third... It was, Is that horrible to say?
It's funny because it's true. I don't
know.
Sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry. See? Yeah. Yes. It's going to be a very interesting... That'll be on Sunday. The CFL semifinals, and then the Grey Cup is next week. We probably should do a podcast on that, actually, now that I think about it. I'll put that on the list. Well, thanks for coming on. We have to also give away... Do we want to give away stuff? Not your two dogs?
Well, yes. Aspen and Rusty, especially Rusty, are currently up for adoption. I know that Dylan from Calgary is going to have first dibs on them.
Oh.
No, I can't give them away. I might get in trouble for that.
Whoa. That was Rusty being a dog. Yeah. Rusty saying, don't die, no, I'm staying.
No, he's an old dog.
Yeah. Oh, that was worse. Anyway.
We can do the one-on-one session or the book. I realized that we were supposed to talk about this before the podcast.
And we didn't. Who's the host of this damn thing anyway? Oh, sorry, Erin's mom. I'm sorry.
Who's running this show?
Who's running this show? Well, here's the one problem, folks, is it does, in order for Erin to send you a paperback book, it does cost for shipping. But we'll come up with a promo. We'll talk after about maybe a promo code for an ebook. How about that?
Yes, that sounds good.
Okay, that will be fair. So thanks, Erin, for coming on. You can follow her on author Erin Chase on Twitter. That's her social media. We do have a bunch of stuff coming up. We'll probably do a Grey Cup podcast. We will have a diver coming on telling his story. He dove 40 feet in a very exotic location. He's going to talk to us. We did not get our wrap up with Me Too done because of Erin's mom, technology. So we're rescheduling that for next week. We have a award winner ebook cover artist coming on as well. And Erin, you didn't know this because I just set this up before we got on. Boozy Chef is coming on the podcast.
Oh, you're going to have so much fun with her.
Yes, so we are going to interview Boozy Chef on the podcast. That will be coming up as well. Meanwhile, follow me, Facebook, Kevin Olenek, Twitter, KVOLE, SoundCloud, KVOLE, Spreaker, KVOLE, YouTube, like and subscribe, Kevin Olenek, Instagram, KVOLE. If you want to become a Patreon with no pressure, it's Kevin Olenek. And I think I've covered all of that. We will leave you, however, with this. Beware of those with the same blood, as all is not what it appears to be. Heed my warning, and take solace in those pure of heart, or you will certainly bring forth your own demise. Dumbfounded and unable to speak, shesh-ah-mun stood in that same spot for what seemed like an eternity. Finally, she slowly backed away, not taking her eyes off the stall-keeper. The old woman stared as shesh-ah-mun, with one finger raised, pointed in accusing yet cautionary manner. Read the book Beyond Palace Walls. Thanks, everybody. We will talk to you soon. Bye for now.